Emily Osment, one thing I admired about her is that she always came very prepared. She was prepared. She was the lead of the show. She took that responsibility seriously, and she always, I mean, everyone actually on Young and Hungry really knew their lines, and it's very appreciated by the staff because, the better the run through or the better the rehearsals, the more that we writers can hone and give you better stuff.
Welcome to the podcast, Jenny Lee.
Hi, Rachel.
Hi, so happy to have you on this bright, beautiful day. It's my birthday, so you are my birthday gift today.
Yeah. Happy birthday.
Thank you. When I met you, which was on July 4th in our Independence Day, I gravitated towards you. I mean, it didn't take me long talking to you to find out that you are an empowered, self-made Hollywood fashionista.
I don't know about all that, but yes, I mean, possibly. Thank you.
Yeah, you got style, and you are a female showrunner. That means a lot in this industry. So I want to take it back a little bit from your early Tennessee days to see how and why did you get to Hollywood?
It's sort of been its crazy circuitous path for me basically getting here. I actually went from, I was born and raised in Nashville, Tennessee, so small town girl, and I had very typical, stereotypical Korean parents, basically, who wanted me, basically, to be a lawyer. They were like, these are the professions. You can be a doctor, you can be a lawyer, you can be a business person. They were very education-oriented, and once my brother, fulfilled their dreams and went to Harvard and became a doctor, I was like, all right, I want to do my own thing, because I'd always wanted to write. I mean, it was just something I loved. I loved reading as a kid. I really wanted to write, but pursuing the arts was definitely not a Korean immigrant want for parents. Do you know what I mean? Having a child who's an artist. So they're like, no, you're going to go to UPenn to become a lawyer. So I had won a couple high school writing contests, like the Young Tennessee Writers Competition, and then a national scholastic, but I didn't place first. I remember I placed second place in this national writing competition, and I was like, I want to be a writer. This proves it. I was telling my parents, and my dad was like, no, you're only second place. It's so hard to be an artist. You have to be first, and you're not first, so I don't think you can do it. So I know it was one of those sort of things. I think they were trying to dissuade me basically from doing it. And NYU, Tisch School of the Arts, reached out to me from that contest. And I honestly only really knew, it's so stereotypical, but I really only knew the Ivy League colleges. So I had never even heard of NYU. I'd never heard of Tisch. And so I was like, oh my God, there's a school for writing. So I applied early and sort of secretly with my mom's permission, but my dad didn't know. And I just wanted to see what would happen. And then when I got in, I was like, oh my God, I got into art school. This is what I'm going to do. And my parents were like, my dad's like, absolutely not. I'm not paying for that. So it was kind of crazy. And he's like, you need to send in your other applications. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to go to college then. And my father was a doctor. And so I was like, oh, look what's going to happen. Dr. Lee's daughter's not going to go to college. What are all your friends going to say? Basically. And then it was kind of a standoff. And then finally they were like, fine, you want to go? Great. But you can't go to New York. You can't see the school. So I had never been to New York City before they dropped me off.
What a shock.
Yes, definitely a shock from coming from small town Tennessee.
I love how feisty you were. I mean, no one's parent wants them to be an actor. I mean, mine definitely did not. Not that they didn't support me in the arts, and some of it I blame on them because they took me to shows and to opera and to ballet, and I got to go to acting camp. I mean, what did you think was going to happen?
Totally. Yeah, see, that's great. My parents, I mean, they certainly weren't don't write stories on the side or anything, and were happy I was a good English student, but they just really didn't encourage it. They just were I think they're very practical and pragmatic and logical. It's in this country, it's very difficult. You've got to make a living, that sort of thing. So I think it was really as they said, it was always for my best interest to have a stable career, which clearly, as we both know, acting, writing is not stable ever.
Never, ever. And you know what? God bless our parents because they want the best for us. And I tell my young actors this, that, it is scary for your parents. But if you have this calling, you have to follow it. There's no other choice. So how did you get from NYU Tisch to Hollywood?
Okay, so from NYU Tisch, I did it, and honestly, I did 2 years of Tisch dramatic writing, and I was like unsure if that's what I wanted to do, really. So I kind of ended up transferring to Gallatin at NYU and just becoming like an English major, and I really wanted to write books, short stories, and plays, but I really, it's kind of funny because I am now a TV writer, that I really wasn't interested in writing for TV or movies. What I think what was interesting about it is that growing up in Tennessee, and that's something that again my parents weren't promoting. I was only allowed to watch 1 hour of television on the weekdays and 2 hours of TV on the weekends, and like that's it. So, and then the small towns that we grew up in outside of Nashville, they only had like the place I lived in high school. We had one movie theater with two movies a week, and they were always. I think they were usually PG. Do you know what I mean? Like, and that was it. So I didn't even have exposure. So I remember when I got to NYU, honestly, I never even really, my roommate was obsessed with Woody Allen at the time. And I was like, have never seen a Woody Allen movie. Like, I just wasn't really that versed in like, movies and TV and like what was out there. It just wasn't something I did. So anyway, I went into book publishing in my 20s in New York because I love the city. And that sort of is like kind of led me in a path to TV because a couple of my books had gotten optioned for TV shows.
That is incredible. So circling back, that means
Yeah.
that your ideas were pure because you weren't influenced by television and film like
Right.
so many of us are. We can't help it. Your ideas came from this, totally original place. So did you try to get your books turned into TV shows, or again, did someone reach out to you and discover them?
Someone sort of reached out to me. I mean, I had a book agent for my first book, which was honestly published in like, I think 2001. And it was about my first marriage, and it was called I Do, I Did, Now What? And it was comedic essays about my first year of marriage. And I'm telling you, all through my 20s, I published it like, I think I was 30 at the time, but right when I was 20, I mean, and all through my 20s, I really wanted to be a novelist. And I just couldn't I couldn't write the novel. I couldn't, I would try short stories, but I just couldn't get any traction. But I had moved to Boston from New York because I'd gotten married, and I had a friend who was an editor who became a book agent, and he and I got a theater subscription because I've always loved the theater in Boston, and we would just hang out. And I was telling him like, oh my God, I'm terrible at being a wife. I'm just like, I don't know how to do it. You know what I mean? Like, I really was like, you think about the wedding, and then once you gets past, I was just like I was kind of bumbling my way through my first year of marriage. And there was a point in time when he was like, I think this is a book. I think this is the book you have to write. You should write, you're hilarious. You should write some of these funny stories. A lot of women will relate to that. So that really was my first book. It really was like a comedic thing about me being like, how do people decide what to have for dinner as a couple or marry? You know what I mean? These are all things that I'm not good at, basically. So, and then once that book got published, I'm not sure exactly how it happened, but I think, they're book scouts and stuff for Hollywood. And then I got a book agent, CA had reached out and they covered my books. And
Wow.
they sold it to like, it actually was a Kate Hudson's production company way back in the day. And it was going to be a sitcom on UPN. And I honestly had nothing to do with it. Like, I mean, they were obviously as a courtesy sending me scripts and things, but I wasn't the writer. I was living in Boston. But I was going to be a bridesmaid in the opening credits for the TV show. They were going to film the pilot. And it was for UPN, which is no longer a network anymore. But, so I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. I was in Boston at CVS buying sunscreen because I was going to fly out to LA and I was going to stay at the Mondrian Hotel and go to Sky Bar. Like, I was very excited for the whole thing. And my CA agent called me and he was like, I have bad news. And I'm like, okay. And he was like, they cast late, which I didn't know what that meant at the time during staffing season, during casting season for all the pilots. And he's like, Les Moonves has to approve all the casting. And he looked at the chemistry test and he nixed it the day before they were about to shoot the pilot, and they killed the pilot. So it never even got shot.
I can't believe it. Les,
Yeah.
what were you thinking? What were you
I know.
thinking?
That
Okay,
was
so that
like-
close call. Your first close call?
Yeah.
Okay. And were you discouraged or were you determined to get another project?
Well, honestly, that kind of made me far more interested in TV, and I'll admit that I had moved to Boston. My husband at the time was a doctor. He was a gastroenterology fellowship at Mass General. That's why we had moved to Boston from New York, and I didn't have that many friends there. So I really did start watching a lot of TV. And I was like, I think I can do this. I think I should try to do TV. Because, I mean, at that point in time, I had sold 2 more books that were humor essays too. And I really, you can't really only 4%, I think, of book authors can make a living on their writing.
Wow,
Like a very
that's
small percentage.
small.
I know, and only
Shocking.
1% like makes tons and tons of money, like as we always hear, the top 1%. So I mean, I was not in that category, and then I ended up getting divorced, and I was like, I really need a way to support myself. So I was like really looking at TV.
Okay, great. Where do you get your sense of humor from? I mean, I can hear it in your voice. I can hear, I talk to actors, I teach actors about being authentic, and like, you have that. I can hear it. Like, you are a self-made person, and I feel as if, correct me if I'm wrong, that you know who you are.
Yeah, I guess that is probably true. Thank you for the compliment. Yes, I guess, I look back at that time in high school and like what did give me the courage to be like, I'm only going to go to NYU, even though I had never been there, and just like stood against my parents at a young age. But it just felt right. It felt like that's what I sort of needed to do. It really did seem like a little bit of a calling. And to me, having a life of an artist, I sort of didn't understand what I was getting into. So even after college, when I went into book publishing, what I realized, there are a lot of people who worked in book publishing that were like trust fund kids. You know what I mean? Like, it's always the same. Like, that's how you get in. It's like, like Nepo babies now in Hollywood. It's just much easier sort of path. So I was super broke all the time, but I just had this like desire in me, and I'm like, I'm okay with that. I can live off credit card debt. Like, I really just did the whole gauntlet in my 20s and really like lived and wanted to like have experiences. That's why I kept thinking I couldn't write a novel in my 20s, because I was like, I gotta live, you know what I mean? Like, I need to go to parties and see my friends and hang out, and there'll be a time when it'll come, for me later, like the writing of the books and stuff. And so anyway, I did come out to LA, and I like rented a car, and I rented a place for a year. I mean, I just rented a place in West Hollywood for a month to like try out Los Angeles. That was my plan. I was like, I gotta see, because I really kind of blamed the demise of my first marriage on Boston. I just wasn't happy there. I love New York City so much. So I was like, I'm just gonna try it. So I came out to LA. I took a bunch of general meetings. They hip pocketed me in their TV department. Like, I wasn't even, like, I was signed with their books, but not necessarily with TV. But they like introduced me around, and I had a couple, I had some general meetings, but I was still a little bit nervous to move out to Los Angeles without a job. So I didn't do it. And then I went back to New York for a little while, and randomly at a party, I met a guy who was a non-writing executive producer of Hope and Faith. Do you remember that show with Kelly Ripa?
It sounds familiar, the name, but I don't think I watched it.
Yeah, so it was like a sitcom, and I just met him at a party, and then afterwards that night, because I really wanted to get into TV and didn't have any contacts really, I called out to his assistant, and I was like, hey, I'm the girl from that party on the bus. Can I take him out to dinner, and like he can explain TV to me? Do you know what I mean? Because I just needed more information, basically. And I just feel like I've always been a little bit I'm not shy, but I mean, I just felt it's hard, I think, as women to like go after what you want in the same way that men do, and being aggressive and being ambitious. And I was like, I gotta be that girl. Like,
and without being flirty, without playing that card, like
totally.
asking for what you want. Please teach me. Please show me. I think. And I'm curious what you think about this. Don't you think it feels so good to mentor young talent, to help young talent find their way?
Totally, absolutely. I definitely do that, because I remember, and I always make a point now that if someone reaches out to me through Instagram, etc., I really do try to make time to like talk to like, young people coming up, because without him, I would have never gotten the opportunity. So I mean, when anyone ever asks like how I got my start, I really do owe it to this guy, Emil Levisetti. I think he directs TV. We're not really in touch as much anymore, but he still directs TV shows himself. And so he got me in, basically. So we had a couple meetings. He really explained like staffing season and like how the cycle works, which really, I mean, we don't really have the network cycle anymore. I mean, but that was 2006, I think, is when I first.
Even though we have streaming, which streaming right now,
right?
Strike, But anyhow, even though we have streaming, the network doesn't have the same cycle. They don't operate the same way.
I mean, they still do, but I mean, in 2006 or 7, it was like, the big networks, they would buy like 30 or 40 pilots. I mean, I think they would buy honestly like 100 pitches, and then from that like pitches, and then everybody would be writing on that cycle, and then those scripts were due in before December, and then they picked up the pilots that they were going to shoot, which usually used to be like 15 or 20. But I mean, this year ABC alone, I think only shot 2 comedies, and then they didn't pick up any of their new shows.
What's on the air then?
Well, I think those are old shows, but like nothing new. They just don't do that pilot method anymore. It's just changed because of streaming. Now they all say that they like develop shows like on a cycle. I mean, just on an open cycle, because it used to be a very definitive time. Like you do the pitches at a certain time.
Yeah. So for actors, there's no more pilot season.
Not as much. I mean, you'll see. Remember when it used to be so frantic? Because I mean, I had one time. I think it was like in 2008 or 9 with my ex-boyfriend. We got a show like greenlit for ABC, and that was like my first big pilot. It was based off a book we had written together, and it was such a frantic pilot season. We had gotten like Barry Watson from Seventh Heaven to like lead, and we just couldn't get cast in a way that they would approve. And it was Steve McPherson, who was president of ABC at the time, and then he killed the pilot again. That was my second pilot that I almost had to go. And then that one got killed too, because it's just like, it was so competitive, getting like actors and stuff for pilot season. But it really has diminished. I mean, that's really what streaming has done.
It's very good to hear this. Not that I would want you to struggle, but actors think we're the only ones who's struggling, and to hear it from a writer's point of view. When did you become a showrunner?
Well, technically, I mean, I have had showrunner capabilities on one show that I did, where I ran a mini room, but I actually have never been a true showrunner, like where I was leading the whole thing. I've been the number 2 on a couple shows. Like I've staffed on like, I think it's 12 or 13 different TV shows now since I came out here. Yeah. So it's been a very long journey. It's true. Like what you said, like with actors, it is like, it's always seems like it's a struggle. But for writers, I'm exactly a good, I think, example of why the Writers Guild is striking, right? I joined the Guild. I was able to join the Guild in 2007, right before the 2007 strike. So I had just joined, and I was a baby writer at the time, but I was a staff writer at 2 network shows. Then I was half a staff writer because I was like on a kid show, and then they partnered me with someone. And so then after that, then I just really needed to like move up the ladder. And it was very hard, and every show either got canceled or I got let go or something happened. So I had to keep repeating the same level over and over again.
Wow.
And only when I got on the Disney Channel Shake It Up, the show with Zendaya's first show with Bella Thorne, that was when I was able to be a story editor, and on 3 seasons I finally got to move up.
That's so exciting. Did you like working with them?
Yeah, I will say I had such a great time working on that show, because I never worked on a multicam before. I'd worked on 2 single cams before that. And the thing about a multicam that I think is so great is that, for those people who don't understand, like, there's like on the first day, there's the table read, and then the writers go back and then they rewrite the episode, based off what we heard the actors perform. And then the next day they perform it, and we walk to stage and we do a run through, and it's really just for the writers. And then you can see like what's on the page and what the actors can do. And then as you get to know the actors, you can see what they're good at and what they want to perform. And then, obviously we try to write to their strengths. So then, especially with children too, because and that was Zendaya's very first TV show. They were trying to figure out like their style and, are they good at physical comedy, like their timing, etc. So I think I just learned so much. I was like a sponge and soaking up everything. So.
Were you ever able to go up to the actor and explain something or get feedback on something, or did it always have to go through the director?
It always really, I think it's like the showrunner can talk to the actors, but I don't think as writers, unless they came up and asked us a specific question. If we had notes on a performance, we would give it to our showrunner. The showrunner would talk to the actors or the director, because there's like a channel. I don't think you can do it. I think I got in trouble, like on one of my first shows, I was on Samantha Who, and I think I did say something or I clarified, but I wasn't giving a note necessarily. But then I think I got yelled at by the director, telling that I was not allowed to speak, that no one speaks to the actors except himself or the showrunner, which I was
Which is
not.
so crazy because you're writing the words that are literally coming out of their mouth. I
Right.
really don't like Hollywood hierarchy. I get why it happens, but sometimes it's distasteful, things that you see on set and the power levels, and it's just how things function. So you've
Right.
had some major credits that we haven't mentioned, and you just mentioned Shake It Up. I'm looking at some of your credits: Brockmire, Boomerang, Run the World. Which ones are your favorite?
You know, the Disney Channel show was probably one of my, it's one of those things that hindsight is 2020. So then when I look back on it, I was like, oh my gosh, that was one of the happiest dreams. We had incredible hours. Like, honestly, like it was a great job. It was like 10 to 6 or 10 to 7, and then obviously on show night, we would be there in the evenings. But it really, like, it was just a really strong room of like, and it was fun and like kind of joyous of like what you wanted it to be. And then I've had some really terrible experiences, you know what I mean, with the showrunner who's honestly an asshole and is like not great to women, or and is sort of like where we're kind of like stressed out and you're scared to talk. So I really have had that gauntlet. But I mean, after that experience of who will not be mentioned on this show, I really made a very strong rule where I'm like, I won't work with assholes anymore. I don't care. I know I need the job. I mean, we all need jobs, but there's got to be a point in time of like what you can handle and what's worth the money or the job for you.
Agree. Yeah. I absolutely agree. I've had both, and I tell my actors, like, you don't know what you're going to get. You just don't know. Sometimes you get a hands-off director. Sometimes you get someone micromanaging. Tell me about being one of the only women, if not the only woman, in the writer's room. What that's like.
It's been like, earlier in my career, like 2007 I started, and then, is when I was really, I guess I was on the Disney show around then, and there was usually I've been lucky, there's usually one or two women. It wasn't always, I think maybe once I was like the only senior level female, but in that bad experience room, I literally got like, at the end of the day when he was keeping like the upper level producer writers, and I was one of them, he would dismiss me with like the staff writers. Because he wanted like a room of guys, basically. So, I mean, that was a little humiliating for me, but I just did it for one season. As soon as I had a chance to leave, I did. And then one of my other best experiences, it's actually my gay best friend created a show, David Holden, called Young and Hungry it was on ABC Family, and then it transitioned to Freeform during that time. So I worked on that show for at least four or five seasons.
Wow.
And had a great time. And that was also a multicam with Emily Osmond on that show.
I would imagine that you come up with completely different perspectives and ideas being the only woman in the room. And do people want to run things by you? Like, well, what would a woman say about that? Or is that not like the playing field these days?
In the rooms my best experiences, I was lucky that I wasn't really the only female writer. Like on Shake It Up. I mean, on Shake It Up, we had I think there was one other woman. And on Young and Hungry, we had a lot of females actually on that staff. And that went well. And it was sort of funny in the sense where, my friend who was a showrunner, Dave Holden, was like, we need a straight guy on this show because it's about a straight relationship, and he was gay. So he's like, I guess I have to hire a straight guy. I'm like, yeah. So it was kind of fun to have the tables turn for once, which is obviously a rare experience. So.
Interesting. Okay. We're going to move into your other huge career. You are a best-selling YA young adult author. Right. So in addition to all this incredible Hollywood television experience, you have created a series called Anna K. Did I say that right? Is it Anna or Anna? Anna.
It's either, but Anna K. Yeah, it was a modern day retelling of Anna Karenina.
I love that. So when did you read Anna Karenina, and how did you ever think to do Anna K?
That was one of my most favorite books. What I've realized since then is that in young adult book publishing, there's a lot of retellings. Everyone's retelling Jane Austen or Shakespeare, and there's a lot of that. And honestly, I didn't know that much about the young adult book business, honestly. I came up with the idea in 2012 when I first saw the movie, the Keira Knightley version of Anna Karenina. I saw it in New York. It was like Christmas, and I remember I saw it actually with my mother, who was in New York City with me visiting. And we really had an interesting discussion about the tragedy of Anna Karenina's life and how it seems so unfair. And what I realized, because I had read the book several times by that point in time, is that it's really about a story about first loves. I mean, granted, it was in the 1800s in Russian, in Russia. So it was a different time period. But I was like, oh, if you made this modern day story of Anna Karenina, it would probably have to be high school students because that's probably the first experience when you kind of like deal with love and relationships these days in modern time. And then I decided to make Anna Karenina like half Korean. And I did that because my brother, I always say my brother married a blonde. You know, she was not a Korean girl. He did a lot of like Asian girls in college, but he married this woman, his wife. And so his three children are half Korean and he lives outside of Philadelphia. And I remember him specifically saying, you have to write books about like half Korean kids for my kids so that they have someone to look at. You know what I mean? That looks like them. Which is something that I also honestly learned on the Disney Channel show because they were very big on like diversity, like in an early stage, not necessarily ever discussing it like in an episode, but just so that like kids could see themselves reflected on TV. So they were always pretty strong about making sure programming reflected like what we wanted the world to look like, though we weren't really allowed to comment on it. You know what I mean? So.
Right. And you mentioned that you've been getting some offers for K-pop. People that are coming to you knowing that you're Korean, is that music? Is that TV? What is that?
It's mainly like, you know, I was like, oh, I make jokes about how I like have pitched on so many different K-pop movies. I will say that most of the studios out there right now are developing a K-pop thing because of the rise of, you know, K-pop it's become so popular that everyone has like a project in development. I actually do have one project with Disney Plus, a feature that I wrote that's adapting a novel called Once Upon a K-Prom. And so that's still technically in development. I mean, we're on strike, but it's in development. And so I'm on my second draft of that. So we'll see what goes. But before that, I pitched on a Netflix show, but I didn't win that job. I pitched on a Netflix K-pop movie. And then I met with like, one or two other studios about rewrite jobs for different K-pop movies that they have in production.
How fun. I mean, yeah. I like K-pop. I think I just think that you do so much. I'm wondering, you're a best-selling author, you write for TV. For creatives listening, how do you discipline? When do you write? How do you get everything done and stay fresh?
That is a great question, Rachel. Mainly in the sense that I'm struggling with it now during the strike. But in general, I feel like once I moved out to LA and I saw, how it's like, I mean, not that there's rhyme or reason and it's all luck, but sometimes it feels like that. I'm sure, you have similar things where you see certain friends who just landed on the right show at the right time and they become like, they just rise like and go so fast, like much faster than where you are. So it's very hard to like see this all the time. And everyone makes the same joke about you read Deadline, you get depressed for an hour afterwards. Like you can't help it because it looks like everyone's doing so much more than you. And so in my head, I kept thinking, I have to have as many irons in the fire because it just seems arbitrary, like what's going to go and what's not. I mean, to give a great example, I was developing a TV show, a kid show called My Sister the Vampire based on a book series. And really fun project. It's based on 18 books. Like the producers had reached out to me because they wanted to sell it to Netflix. And I had been on an approved list of Netflix writers. And so I got the job and this shows you how crazy it is. I pitched it as a multicam and then they bought it, but then they're like, you know what? We want it as a single cam. So I'm like, great. So once my contract was done, I write a single cam, I turned it in. So that was, I don't know, probably a year later, just because of the contract. Then they're like, you know what? Our plans have changed internally. So we actually want multicams now. Can you write it as a multicam? So they paid me a rewrite fee. I wrote it as a multicam. I turned that in. And then honestly, I kid you not, they come back to me and they're like, can you write this as a family show? Because after COVID, all parents are watching it together. And I'm like, you know what? I'm out. I did 2 versions. I think I'm done. So then the producers brought in a different writer to try to do that show. But then Netflix ultimately passed on the project. So my producers called me and they're like, look, we have your 2 great scripts, a single cam and a multicam. Can we go try to sell it elsewhere? And I'm like, go with God. That'd be amazing. Yeah, if you can sell it, do it. That's your job. So they call me back. They sold it to HBO Max. And I'm like,
congrats.
Oh, amazing. So I was like, oh, that's fun. Hold your congrats for you're about to hear another, like the continuation of crazy. So I turn into HBO Max. And at that point, they're like, the kid was for, it was for 12-year-olds. And they're like, we want it to be freshman in high school, but clean teen, which is like romance and holding hands, but not like real teen. It's not like Euphoria teenagers. It's like, what you see on Disney Channel. And I was like, okay. So I was developing the show for that way. And that's when I got a mini room and they wanted to, got to hire 5 other writers. They wanted 4 extra scripts, but I felt like this was my closest chance of having my own show finally go. So I was like, amazing. I do that. And then right then they're like, there's a changeover of what they're doing on HBO Max. They want grittier, older young adult and not this. So then it gets canceled. So then that one dies. And I was like, oh my God, I cannot believe my luck. And then because it's a vampire show, the vampire that never dies, then immediately afterwards they said a different division of HBO Max wants to buy it. And I'm like, are you kidding me? And they're like, yeah. So they're like, and then I meet with them and they're like, we want a younger version. We're looking for like 7 to 12-year-olds.
What?
I know. So I had to write an entirely other version for a different division. And then I wrote that one and everyone was happy with that version. And then it was right when HBO Max recently, before the pandemic, before the strike, of course, they were like, we're not doing kids programming anymore. And then that one died 4 times.
I cannot believe this story.
Right. That's like, but that is sort of, once I started to realize, I was like, it just has nothing to do with me. Do you know what I mean?
You.
And like my writing, like I've sold this project so many times and you can point to a different reason every time about why it didn't work out. So that's what I was really like, I just need to have as many irons in the fire as possible. Before the strike or last year, I had 5 or 6 projects in development. And then right now I only have 2 that are alive. They just slowly like died for one reason or another. That's just like how it goes. So, that's kind of the mentality the advice I would give to people out in Hollywood is like, it's not just you. You're not alone in the suffering. It's just like, it's infuriating and it makes you crazy. And then going back to like what you asked me about writing books, every time I'm so like drained from Hollywood and like TV and so many notes and so many rounds, I'm like, oh, I want to write a book. Because you just have much more freedom when you're writing a novel on your own. And then I'm like, oh, because like, when you give it to your editor, it's not the same as like getting notes. Obviously they have edits and usually they're great, but it's not like so many like hoops that you are continually feeling like you have to jump through like so many hoops in Hollywood. And it's just a little bit of a different thing. So that's when I gravitate.
Yeah, it just sounds like Hollywood is so fickle. Yes. That's what I'm hearing, that they don't know what they want. And that is frightening that we're in the hands of people who don't know what they want, our lives, our fates, our livelihoods. And I think that's why it's really important, and I believe you have this, is to have a balanced life, to have friends, to have relationships, to have other interests in life, because we, can't really count on this. And we all see that now with the strike. We're not working. And so what else do you have? What else do you, and so what's, and it's awful. It goes back to our parents. Like, what's your backup plan?
Right. Exactly. It is.
They were smart after all. But you know what? We know it's cyclical. It will come back. And I have no doubt that you are going to be a huge showrunner in addition to being, such a successful author. Before we leave today, any advice for actors? You've worked with a lot of actors, you've seen a lot of actors. Is there any one piece of advice that you think would be helpful, something hands-on? It could be something practical like know your lines, anything.
I've been lucky to work with a lot of great actors. I will say for Emily Osment, one thing I admired about her is that she always came very prepared. She was prepared. She was the lead of the show. She took that responsibility seriously. And she always, everyone actually on Young and Hungry really knew their lines. And it's very appreciated by the staff because, the better the run through or the better the rehearsals, the more that we writers can hone and give you better stuff, basically. So if in a rehearsal, someone doesn't know their lines and they don't know their blocking or their staging, and then the joke doesn't work, it's hard for us to know is it because the actor wasn't prepared or is it because it doesn't work because it's our fault on the page it doesn't work. So, that is really what's helpful because, what I love about Hollywood or writing for TV or writing for movies is it is such a group project. You know what I mean? It's putting on a show. That's why multicams really is so fun. It does remind me of writing a play. We're all in it together. So everyone has their part to play. What I think a lot of people don't understand when I meet people at weddings or randomly out there in the world, they're like, oh my God, you write for TV. I'm like, it's 100 to 200 people involved to put on a TV show for what you see. You have to really think about like the crew and everyone behind the scenes, and everyone's working together to have it be good, you know? So I think it's just like, yes, writers, everyone has their piece of the, you know, pie that they have to like try to like take pride in and do their sort of best work. I mean, so that's why we're all out here. It's the dream, right? I mean, I'm like chomping at the bit to like really truly get my own show and then put it on the air, for better or worse, to see what happens. Because I mean, that's just, I don't know, that's, we're all chasing a dream,
Right.
and that's why we're out here.
And it's so beautiful. We love this dream. What a great way to end. Jenny, where can we find you? Social media, website, anything you want to give out?
Really, I'm only on Instagram, and it's at Jenny Lee Writes, because I have, as a writer, I'm a terrible procrastinator. So I think if I was like on social media all the time, I would waste a lot of time that I should be writing.
Right. Good
So
for
I kind
you.
of limited that. Yeah.
Good for you. Okay, Jenny Lee Writes. It's so wonderful having you on here. I feel inspired by you. So thank you. You made my day. I can't wait to see what you do next. In the meantime, we can watch Jenny Lee. You can go to IMDb and see her credits and watch the stuff she's already done, right? I hope some
absolutely.
of it we can rent, watch. Okay, good. Okay, until the next time, Jenny, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Rachel, and happy birthday. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thanks. I know I will now. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jenny. So much fun talking to you. I love hearing your opinions on things, and I look forward to seeing what's next for you once we get off the picket lines. If you'd like to hear more of my podcast, please visit my website at diaryofanactress.com. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for sharing. And until the next time, stay inspired.